Chapter 1. Luciferine. Mother always told me to stay close to the light. She'd say it was my guide through the dark, away from the creatures hidden inside. That was my special rule. The other children didn't have to follow it. Often, from the forest lines, I would watch them run into the woods, hand in hand, laughing without a care. They'd cut through the stiff darkness with their own light, and venture into the unknown, their glowing silhouettes shrinking the further they strayed. With my feet dug into the soft soil, I wished to be like them. This is when Mother would tap my shoulder and lower herself onto her knees. She would say something reassuring, and I would muster the courage to look into her smiling eyes. When she'd reach out her hand, I'd grab it and allow her to guide me through the tall grass and back into our village home. I'd always look back. This didn't last for long. Soon, after I turned 12, I started breaking my rules. Or, more put, I stopped hearing them. They no longer existed in my world. During the day, when Mother was tending the garden or washing the laundry, I would slip out the front door and into the town streets. I'd run through the winding village, past the vast farming fields and cottage homes, until I reached the grassy meadows lying just on the outskirts of town. Here, I would spend hours exploring the land beyond. At night, I waited until the other children winded down and then let the night guide me. Instead of the grassy fields, I'd find myself in front of the enchanted forest, the same place I'd once longed for. But now, I would step in without a care. I'd wander off the familiar dirt path, ducking under overhanging branches and weeding through compact bushes. This way, I'd find countless hidden areas, enchanted meadows, crystal caves, you name it. I'd spend hours exploring the enchanted forest, making it my second home. The only light I had was the moonlight. Unlike the other kids, I couldn't produce light magic. A birth defect, I heard Mother call it once. This never stopped me. Getting home was hardly a problem. I was good at retracing my steps. Most landmarks had become familiar to me. Mother often worried about my safety, but monsters didn't roam in these parts. For the more sinister magic, the legends, they were what I looked for. They didn't scare me. Each night was much the same. I would slip into the forest and roam around for as long as my legs would allow me. Dancing, singing, exploring, all under the millions of stars. I had no set path, just endless possibilities. That is, until I found it. One night, many moon cycles ago, I was making my way around the eastern part of the forest. The moon was only a sliver, which meant visibility was low. I had stumbled multiple times throughout the night. My knees were scraped, painted with streaks of dirt and blood, and my hair was a tornado of a mess. Leaves and twigs had taken nest within. The eastern forest was where the mountains and forests connected. Here you could find grassy undergrowth smoothly transitioning into hard rock, perfect for damp caves abundant with mossy treasures. Because of the lighting, caves were growing increasingly difficult to locate. I had stuck close to a sharp-angled wall. I scanned my surroundings, while I kept a hand trailing across the rigid rock for guidance. I kept at it until I felt my hand touch empty space. I looked towards the wall and waited for my eyes to adjust. In front of me was the entrance to a cave. It was almost double my height. The rim was staggered and sharp. It resembled the mouth of a wicked beast, only, instead of the hot breath expected from a living creature, my skin prickled with a freezing draft. No matter how long I stood there, my eyes couldn't adjust to the space inside the cave. All I saw was an eerie darkness. I took a step back and looked up at the sky. The moon was straight over my head. It was late. I decided this was a good time to head back, not wanting to risk my safety. I was turning away from the cave when I stopped in my tracks. A gentle whistle was emanating from within the cave. It came in short bursts, almost as if it was singing in tune with the wind. At that moment, I thought back to the legends of monsters my mother would tell me night after night when I was younger. How they'd wait, watching you like a predator watches its prey, waiting patiently while it lures you closer towards your demise. I thought of the way she described those creatures, tall and straggly with sharp teeth and claws, perfect for ripping open flesh. I thought of all the reasons I should ignore the strange sounds coming from the cave. But then I remembered how while Mother was reading to me, I'd grip my sheets and sit up straight. I'd stare at Mother with anticipation, waiting for the next tale. fascinated with the idea of legends so incredible. And long after she finished and turned out the light, I dream about finding these beasts deep in the forest. I turned back around and took a step into the cave. Inside, the cave was colder than what had been blowing on the outside. If I wasn't so accustomed to low temperatures, then I would have turned around and gone home right then. Instead, I pushed myself forward further into the cave. From what I could see by the soft light coming from the entrance, the cave widened into a larger space about the size of a home. The walls looked to be bumpy, with protruding rocks and some naturally formed holes. On the other hand, the floor was extremely smooth rock. I made a sliding motion with my feet to test the limits of this texture, and decided it was definitely a slipping hazard. I had to be careful with my movements. As I made my way deeper, my eyes had begun to dilate. I noticed an opening at the back of the cave. It looked to lead into a hallway of some sorts. I followed my gut and walked towards it. I gripped the edge and peeked into the space. My suspicions were confirmed. On the left, the scene before me was a long hallway, leading to more darkness. However, there was a mirrored hallway to my right. There was two paths leading opposite from each other. The walls here were tighter, like an arch, with an arch-like structure. It looked to only be wide enough to fit a single person. Unlike the large area from the room before, this looked unnatural, as if it was carved by someone or something. I paused for a moment and thought about which side I'd enter. I took a chance and chose the passage to my right. I think I walked for a few minutes. I felt like a small rodent digging through dirt tunnels. Like the bigger cave, the floor here was smooth. If I really wanted to, I could have probably glided down the hallway. Other than that, I couldn't tell much else about my surroundings. The light from the cave entrance didn't reach here, so I was more or less walking blindly. The tunnel was small, enough for me to touch both sides with outstretched hands. This is how I guided myself forward. The whistling had stopped when I entered the tunnel. It was deathly silent. No sounds other than my footsteps. I closed my eyes and listened to the gentle pitter-patter across the stone flooring. I moved my attention to my hands and how the rough rock ran past my fingertips. I'd begun to think to myself, just how long does this cave go? Suddenly my foot got caught on a loose rock and I flew forward. My body hit the ground, hard. For a moment, I was confused. When I came to my senses, I fumbled around for a grip to push myself back onto my feet. But weirdly, my hand touched empty space. I sat on my knees and scooched forward to the edge. I ran my hand to one side of the wall and back to the other. I realized there was a drop in the floor. I twisted my body and felt near my feet. I hadn't tripped over a loose rock, but on a raised ledge. The path I'd chosen was a trap. It led to a death hole. Carefully, I got to my feet, backed off of the ledge and away from the hole. I shook with nerves as I realized how close of an encounter I'd had with death. I turned around and made my way back to the larger cave, slowly with shaking legs. I walked down the left path with less confidence. I kept my arms outstretched, touching both sides like previously. However, my footsteps were slower and more careful. I knew I'd reached the end of the path when my foot bumped a ledge similar to the one in the other hallway. I crouched down and felt the area in front of me. Instead of an instant drop, the floor fell away at a tilted angle. It felt like the entrance to a slide. Were both tunnels a trap? I thought for a long moment if I wanted to explore further. While going down the slide wouldn't mean instant death, it was still a gamble. Where would it take me? Would I be able to find my way out? As these questions raced through my head, I thought about how worried Mother would be if I didn't come home. I didn't know what laid ahead, and I was growing tired after everything that had happened. I promised myself that I would come back after another night. I stood up and stepped off the ledge. Except my foot didn't hit the stone floor. It rolled over a loose rock? What the hell? My legs flew out from under me. I tried to catch myself, but because of the smooth floor, I fell backwards and headfirst into the tunnel. I let out a startled sound. I couldn't see anything, but by the way the floor was quickly moving beneath me and how my stomach was feeling airy, I could tell I was sliding downwards, towards the unknown. I fell for no longer than 10 seconds when I was shot out into an opening. I rolled a few times until my momentum slowed down and I came to an abrupt stop. My head was pounding. It took a couple quiet moments for my head to stop spinning. Once I felt oriented, I realized that I was lying on my back. My eyes were closed, but I could feel a dim light on my face. Where was I? Where I was, there was light. I peeked my eyes open. My breath hitched. The ceiling was high above me. It towered up to what must be the top of the mountain. It looked as if someone had hollowed out the inside of the mountain. But this place was natural. I could tell by the ragged walls and stalactites lining the roof of the cave. I stood up without taking my eyes off the vast ceiling above me. When I finally snapped out of my trance, I looked down to my surrounding area. If I thought the ceiling was amazing, then this was a sight not even the royal palace could fathom. Scattered around the floors of the cave were countless plants, all letting off a mix of green and blue iridescent luminescence. I gasped. I'd never seen something like this before. The plants before me dazzled brighter than the stars I'd roamed under every night. I stood there in shock until the whistling from earlier started up. Inside this cavern, it was louder. The sound was clear and coming from every direction possible. I realized it came from a hole in the roof of the cave that led outside. I could see the sky through it. This is where the wind came from. It funneled into the cave and bounced around until it made its way into the slide and out through the initial entrance on the cave I'd come from. I looked around and took it all in. The cave felt alive in every sense possible. I spent hours wading through the plants, the bits of light rubbing into my clothes and going unnoticed. I picked up flowers that had fallen onto the floor and inspected them. I brought the leaves up to my face and watched as the light inside shimmered. I used the braiding techniques my mother taught me to then weave them into the braids on each side of my head. When I got tired of the plants, I lay down on a cushioned part of the stone floor and closed my eyes. I listened to the whooshing sounds of the wind. They whispered and groaned, circling around the cavern and into my ears. I stayed there for what felt like hours, and when it was time to go, I slipped out through a second tunnel that led to an opening farther east than the first one. That night, I stayed out longer than usual. While I was walking through the grassy fields on my way home, I ran into Mother. She'd been roaming the town looking for me. She ran up to me with tears in her eyes, and without a beat, she scooped me into a tight embrace. I could feel the desperation she'd felt the past few hours and how she dug her fingers into my skin. I knew she was making sure I was whole. When she finally pulled back, there were spots of glowing substance littered all over her clothes. When she looked down at me, she noticed glowing flowers woven into my hair and bioluminescent pigment splattered all over my face. For a moment, she looked into my eyes, a range of emotions swirling throughout her face. But slowly, it melted into a gentle understanding. She realized I'd grown up. My rebellion was inevitable. Again, she hugged me and whispered silent prayers of my future safety. That's the day Mother figured out my adventures. Agriculture has always had great importance to the Lightborn. From a young age, most of us are taught skills from how to properly till soil to the importance of forming a deep connection with the natural world around us. Most older light children were either tasked with assisting the adults with tending the fields or working in the local bakeries and merchant shops. If they were really lucky, they would instead be on their way to the royal kingdom for their daily magic lessons. Mother had always been a simple agriculturalist. From dawn to dusk, I'd watch her out in the fields with her back bent and arms outstretched into thick bulks of growth. She had a gentleness about her that showed in everything she did. I know she loved her job out under the sun. It showed through the nutrient plants she grew. I'm not sure if she had the same hopes for me, though. Unlike her, the fields weren't for me. When I did help out, my methods would be rough. Rather than a smooth current, I'd be ragged waves, unsteady on my feet, playing a game of tug-of-war. After hours of this rough game, my skin would become spotted and red with burns from the sun. I'd never fail to develop knots in my back. My hands couldn't create the same love Mother's did. After multiple failed attempts at farming in the fields, Mother finally let me stay home and do the house chores. Because of my young age, this sufficed for my daily tasks. Mother didn't mind, and most of the other villagers didn't question my absence from the fields either. I knew this wouldn't always be the case, though. Time only moved forward. I was only going to get older, and soon house chores wouldn't be an acceptable excuse to not work in the fields. I got up from the kitchen table I was thinking at, with a heaviness I couldn't shake. This was a worry for later. I cut across the living room and grabbed a broom from the storage closet. Today was already planned. I would do light cleaning and then go out into the town to buy food. Cleaning wasn't much of a hassle for me. The cottage opened up into a massive living room space with a fireplace to the left and the kitchen to the right. It was no bigger than a small field of wheat. The only other additions to the house was a short hallway that led the way to a bedroom on each side, one being mine and the other being Mother's, respectively. Enough space for the two of us. Each time I clean, there's no specific order I like to go about. Today I decided to start in the kitchen and end with the bedrooms. Time passed slowly as I swept, scrubbed, and organized. In the kitchen, Mother and I weren't strict on organization. If you looked around, you would be bombarded with stacks of Tupperware on every surface. Carefully, I wiped down the colorful cups and plates, each having unique designs reminiscent of the intricate designs you'd see in the royal palace. The hefty amount being collected from the years of meeting people and traveling to places. The walls were similar. They were painted a deep ivy green, but you'd hardly notice it due to the various painting and decorations placed in no specific order. Some had frivolous frames, and others were plain, only showing the art. If you tilted your head a bit, you would then see a ceiling filled with hanging plants and objects. By the kitchen window, there was a collection of wind chimes. When Mother opened the screen, the gentle breeze played us sweet melodies, bringing peace to our home. I loved our house. Each part of it played an important role in my personality. It brings me joy when I clean. The loving care I put into scrubbing dishes and sweeping the floor fills this house with my own unique magic, an invisible kind. I looked up from my scrubbing and looked out the kitchen window. It had been pushed open earlier by my mother before she left for the fields for the day. A quiet jingle was playing, a reflection of the wind's languor. The window looked out into a few small agricultural fields. The one closest to me was where Mother was working. I stopped scrubbing and stared at her for a few moments, the same picture I'd had of her since I was young, back bent and arms reaching down, a smile on her face. I smiled and went back to my cleaning. It didn't take me long to finish cleaning for the day. I was doing the last of it in Mother's room, a small space with a simple layout. A bed against the right corner of her room, some shelves on the accompanying walls for clothes and other items. On the wall opposite to the door, there was a massive window. It shined warm sunlight into the room. You could also see the fields from here. What brought life to her room wasn't the window, though. It was what was right next to it. Up against the left corner of her room was a tiny desk and chair. On it had a sewing machine, and several colored fabrics. Underneath the desk was more baskets filled with cloths, yarn, and more. This is where Mother sewed. Her third biggest love in this world, after me in the fields, was clothes making. Her free time was spent sitting here at this tiny desk, humming a tune while she pumped the sewing pedal and pushed cloth up and down the needle. This is how she made my favorite shawl. After I showed her the glowing plants, she toyed around with them. She'd come to the realization that she could weave them into fabric, and made a bioluminescent shawl for me to wear when I went out. She told me if I was going to sneak out at night and be reckless, she would rather me be able to see properly. I've worn it ever since. Every night, the shawl and my hair flowers help light up my path. It may not be my own magic, but it's something that's undeniably me. A warmth spread through my chest as I recalled the memory. Then I quickly fell as I remembered the groceries I still had to buy. Crap! I threw on my shawl draped on the couch, grabbed my bag, and raced out the door. I made my way down the gravel path that led from my house into the city. On my way, I waved to Mother, who gave a small wave back. My cottage was dead center between the middle of town and the outskirts. This gave a nice balance of architecture and nature. In town, I stopped at a collection of stores, from the meat shop where I picked up chicken and beef, to the vegetables and fruit stands scattered around the fronts of buildings. By the end of my trip, I had a heavy bag filled to the brim. My way back to the house was just as eventful as my way from. I passed the same wooden buildings, the same plain fields, and the same people. I was used to this familiar life. I will admit, sometimes I wish I was born with the same gifts as my peers. I wish I could wander the forest side by side with those I grew up with, light trailing behind us, loud and bright, bringing life to the night sky. I tried once to trail along with the others, but I was quickly washed out and forgotten. The glow of my cape was never as bright as genuine magic. It's quieter, colder. Like the insects that roamed the forest floor, I blend into the forest. I was still a couple blocks from my cottage. I was swinging my bag side to side, humming a tune. "What you got in the bag?" a voice called from behind. I continued walking forward, my humming unwavering. "Is it cabbage? Or maybe tangerines?" The voice was closer. It had a teasing inflection to it. "They're in season, you know." I felt a shuffling from the bag I was carrying. With a quick jerk, I moved the bag away and turned to face the annoyance. First thing you do when you get back is try and steal a defenseless girl's groceries. What kind of grating is that? The boy in front of me let out a laugh. I think we both know how defenseless you really are. The person that stood in front of me was my dearest friend, Aurelio. He wore clothes from the palace. His pants and button-up were fitted to his body. They were dark brown. The cuffs were lined with gold, a touch considerate of his powers. It was a stark difference from the simple, loose drapes I was wearing. He looked refined. "You're still in your palace clothes," I said. Sharp observation. "Yeah, I just got here. I couldn't wait to see you." "I'm honored I was the first person you thought to visit. Who else is worthy enough for that spot?" I laughed at his charm. No matter how long we spent apart, we always fell back into this playful rhythm. 2 years ago, Aurelio was scouted by the royal kingdom. He was chosen to attend the Royal Light Academy in regards to his high magical ability. His powers first became apparent when we were kids. Before we were assigned positions, we were allowed to spend our days playing. Aurelio and I usually spent our days together, only splitting up at night. Aurelio and I had one major thing in common growing up. We were both never allowed to play in the woods at night. My reason being my birth defect, and he was simply afraid. He saw the dark as an enemy. Instead, he chose to stay at home and practice his magic. Some kids saw our absence from the wood as a sign of weakness. When Aurelio and I would play in the streets, kids would sometimes shout words at us. They would taunt our inability to be like them. We'd ignore them, focus on something else. When they would leave, we wouldn't talk about it, and continued like nothing was wrong in the first place. One evening, Aurelio and I were playing in the town. We skipped from stall to stall, looking at the goodies each seller had to offer for the day. We both had a small pouch of gold coins to spend, thanks to our own respective families. I had kept my pouch inside a small bag attached to my side, hidden under the fabric of my shawl. However, Aurelio, being the airhead he is, opted to carry it around in his hands. We were looking over the strawberry stall. It was spring at the time. I was prodding through the strawberry, only adding the best to the basket I was carrying. Aurelio was doing the same, but he seemed a bit distracted. Out of nowhere, he was shouting at a kid behind us. I turned around, confused to what was happening. "I told you to give it back," Aurelio shouted. He swiped at the other boy's hand. I raised myself onto my tiptoes to try and see what the boy was holding. Whoa. What's going on over here, boys?" The stall's manager had come out to see what was going on and to prevent a possible fight. "Let's get this settled. Come on now. What's in your hand, boy?" he asked the kid Aurelio was mad at. "Nothing." Aurelio just started freaking out, yelling at me for nothing. "That's not true. He stole my bag of gold coins. Luciferine, look. Those are my bag of coins, right?" I finally got a good look at what the boy was holding, and sure enough, it was Aurelio's bag. The manager took a step towards the boy. "Is this true?" "You can tell me the truth. I won't get mad. I just want to get this situation sorted out as soon as possible." The boy shook his head. "No, sir. This bag here is mine." I looked up at Aurelio. His thick eyebrows were downturned. He was clearly upset. "You're lying," he said. The boy just shook his head again. The manager turned his head to Aurelio. "Listen, kid. There's no way for me to know who that bag belongs to. I'll let you have a free bag of strawberries, and we can all be on our way. Does that sound good?" "No!" Aurelio's cheeks were turning a bright red now. "You can't expect me to just let this go. My mother gave me that allowance, and I plan to use every last bit of it." The boy started backing up. He was gonna run. "Hey now." The manager looked back and forth between the two boys. He was obviously conflicted. "Oh, no you don't." A rush of panic went through me. I thought Aurelio was going to tackle this kid. "Aurelio, we can figure this out. Just hold on a sec." The kid let out a yelp. I looked over at him. My eyes widened. There was a stream of silver funneling out of the bag. It swirled around into the sky, and into Aurelio's hands. Before it hit his palms, it formed back into gold coins. Everyone was shocked. "Aurelio, did you do that?" I asked. He was looking down at the coins in his hands, unaware of the question I'd just asked. The boy dropped the bag and ran off. I walked over and picked it up. When I opened it, I saw nothing inside. I looked back at Aurelio. He was still fiddling with the coins in his hands, lost in thought. After apologizing to the manager, we went back to my house. We decided not to talk about it, but the mood was heavier after that. A few days later, Aurelio received a letter in the mail, an invite to train at the royal palace. Everything else was history. I bumped his shoulder with mine. "How's the training going?" "I heard they've been working you guys to the max." "It's been tough, but you know me, I keep up." He ran his fingers through his brown curls and puffed up, clearly showing off. I giggled at his movements. "But seriously, the king's been riled up about a bunch of nothing. I guess he was feeling pretty bad about it, so he let me and some of the others take the week off. Thank the heavens, because I was really losing it up there." "Well, I'm glad you're back, whatever the reasoning may be." I smiled at him, but then quickly let it fall. Something he said had piqued my curiosity. The king's being worried about something. I looked to the side and shuffled my feet, hesitant to open my mouth. "I was wondering, though." Aurelio eyed me with suspicion. "You don't think the king's worries have to do with the legends, do you?" Aurelio's face hardened. I knew how he would react to this question, but I decided to ask anyways. He looked at me with a frown. "I told you to stop with that nonsense." His voice raised a smidge. "Listen, what if there really is something out there? The days have been weird. The winter solstice isn't for days, but it's been freezing cold. My flowers and cape have been acting weird too." "There's nothing out there, Luciferine." He cut me off. The king's worrying for nothing. He's just being his usual paranoid self." I refused to back down. "Yes, but what if there's something he's not telling the general population? What if he's hiding the existence of some kind of threat to the light realm? A majority of the woods are unexplored. Imagine the creatures we've yet to discover." "Enough with this! Legends don't exist. If you can't trust the king, then trust me. Everything is fine." It was my turn to cut him off. "And what about the waterfall?" Aurelio went silent. I looked into his eyes. We've both been near the edge. You've never stopped and asked yourself if there's seriously nothing down there? A look of uneasiness flashed across his face. He looked towards the fields ahead of us and didn't respond. I fumbled with the strap of my bag, waiting for an answer. "Look, I've only got a few days back. Can we not fight while I'm here?" he sighed. "Fine." The sun was no longer in the center of the sky. It began its descent towards the west. Aurelio told me that he had to get home, but he would visit me in the coming days. We hugged and exchanged a few more tame words before he left. I watched him walk back towards the town, the same confident stride he had the day we first parted from each other, when he had been chosen by the kingdom because of his magical ability. I felt uneasy. Something was changing in Aurelio, and I pinned the blame on the kingdom. I let out a breath of relief when I got home. I set down the groceries and went to my room. I sat down on my bed, a little smaller than Mother's. I felt the quilted fabrics and mattress bend beneath my weight. A little squeak also made itself present, a sign of the bed's age. The room went from a dewy glow to a harsh dim. A cloud must be passing through. I'm at my pillow, debating whether I should take a nap. That's when I noticed a flickering glow and illuminating from my hair. Flowers and cape. They dimmed and brightened in a messy rhythm, almost as if they were trying to communicate. They did this sometimes, but it was becoming more and more frequent. I think it could sense how dearly I missed the cave. Soon I'd visit it. I was itching for alone time in my glowing sanctuary. I looked down at the flowers woven into my hair, the same ones I first picked the day I found the cave. No longer blinking, they settled into a uniform glow. My face faltered for a split second. Although it was bright out, they were somehow dimmer. A reflection of my own heart, I thought. The vessel holding a soul that longed to be brightened by the magic of the cave. I laid down and closed my eyes.